Avishai is being shy. Muhammad Khdeir is the martyr of Al-Aqsa, or is he? And Shabbat Shalom. Much more as we talk HBO's Our Boys Season 1, Episodes 5 and 6, Shabbat Shalom and Acceptance of Silence. The AfterBuzz After Show starts right now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Usually I have this very excited, energetic demeanor, and I still do as I'm excited and energetic about this show, HBO's Our Boys, but I do feel like there's a solemn tone to the show, so there's a solemn tone to this panel, but that doesn't mean we can't have a great discussion. I am Tehran. I will be hosting and paneling on this panel. However, all of you at home are as much, if not more, a part of this panel as me. We are missing Steph Sabra and our co-host, who we love so much, so thank you so much for being here with us at home. We are going to be talking about episodes 5 and 6, Shabbat Shalom and Acceptance of Silence. Two very different episodes, and yet one very important story. Of course, we're going into the story of the murder of Muhammad Khdeir, which set Israel and Palestine ablaze in more ways than one. So that's a literal and honestly a metaphor for what was going on during this time. It's a horrible tragedy of story, and I have to say that, in my opinion, HBO is doing it more than justice. And I know they're doing a good job when both sides, quote unquote, are upset and up in arms about this, because they're telling it in a way that gives it such a true, realistic perception and description of a story that's been held and subject to so much PR, something that's even gone on in the show. So we're going to discuss all these things. We're going to break down episodes 5 and 6, Shabbat Shalom episode 5, Acceptance of Silence episode 6. We're going to break them down individually. Episode 5, we're going to get to Yosef Chaim, who seems to be the ringleader of all going on, but we're going to also talk about Rabbi Yeshek ben Shoshan, who is the rabbi who seems to be in some ways an enabler in some means. Now, I'm not, of course, placing any responsibility on the rabbi, but I'm just saying that depiction of who he is as a character is one that's very known and honestly very real in description. We're going to also talk about Simon going undercover. Simon is undercover. Wow, that was a heavy part of the story. That Shabbat dinner scene, which was extremely intense. I mean, if you watched that episode, you knew how we all felt. We felt worried and tense and anxious for everyone. And of course, maybe break down the story of Pinhas just because it was such a relevant part of the story. Now we're going to translate into episode 6, interrogation. That interrogation scene, of course, is the primary source of episode 6. It's like they change gears. Here we get our suspects and they're apprehended. But what comes out of that? The good doctor, yes, Dr. Deborah Segal goes in and is able to convince a shy Avishai to speak up. That whole concept of the acceptance of silence because of his vow that he made. Yuri, we're going to talk about the lawyer. We're going to talk about that Law and Order, Yuri Korb, and what he has to go through and how important this is to him and who Yuri is as a character, because we get a lot of insight on him. And we're going to talk about the Dawn Martyr. That was such a big part of the episode, even though it seemed to be just one line, where Muhammad Khdeir is on print. He is the martyr of Al-Aqsa, and the father distinguishes he didn't die in a protest. He didn't die at war. And we're going to call him the Dawn Martyr, and we're going to leave it at that. So he's trying to appease so many sides, and of course still going through the pain. We do have some amazing news and gossip for you, and a segment called You Should Know, where we break down something that is a detail in the show that maybe you at home are not aware of, and we're going to break that down for you to let you know. Let's start with episode 5, Shabbat Shalom. My overall thoughts, very intense, very strong episode. Understanding Chabad and understanding that ultra-Orthodox community is very imperative to that episode. You'd have to understand where that community stands and the thoughts of it. You'd have to know a lot about Hasidic Jews, maybe understand Hasidim, and Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, of course, who led and paved the way. That whole community in itself was a character in episode 5. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was brilliantly portrayed. Of course, I'd have to, as an audience, I'd have to understand the difference between Ashkenazis and Sephardism, which is something that comes up throughout the show, and you would be very aware of had you grown up in these communities and in these circles. With me, myself, of course, I've grown up in many different circles. It's my background is that I'm half black, half Persian, which is, of course, Iranian and Middle Eastern, but my family is Muslim, Zoroastrian, Christian, and Jewish. And I grew up heavily in the Middle East community, heavily in, of course, America, and heavily in each one of the religions. So I have some background in each of the understandings of these cultures and these religions, and a good mind into the people. And more importantly, I was literally just there 2 weeks ago. I was once again in Israel and in Palestine. I was in Bethlehem. I was in Jerusalem. I was in Tel Aviv. I was in Haifa. I was in Hebron. I was in Ramallah. I was in all these cities, and I go basically yearly. So I'm very familiar with the territory. So when I speak on things, I'm coming from, sure, a personal opinion, but also with some type of knowledge into the background. And that's why it's so imperative when I'm watching these shows, I'm watching the truth. I remember this, and I hate using the word conflict because it actually dismisses the fragile nature of all of this, but I remember this as an issue and how severe it was. And honestly, episode 5 and episode 6, episode 5 made me think, while episode 6 was a fast forward into now we're getting into the meat of the crutch of what this show is about, were the first 2 times that I didn't actually cry watching the show, because now we've moved past an emotional sympathy. Now we're going into the cultural empathy and into the legal and judicial process of this show. With episode 5, I do want to start off with Yosem Chaim. Yosem Chaim, of course, being the youngest son of a rabbi, but also the young uncle where the kids kind of gravitate towards him. We do see some conflict between him and some of the kids. There's a bit of a conflict. He's not the leader that you think that he is. And it's not because of how he is. It's because these kids are grown and they're realizing that their uncle is maybe leading them down a different path. Of course, we know that Avishai has problems. He goes and sees Dr. Devra, which is a very difficult place to be. The doctor is a therapist and a psychiatrist in a community that's not known for communicating to outside and not known for opening up so much. So it's a very difficult process, and yet she seems to maintain it. And then we, of course, know that Yosef Chaim also goes there, and Shimon pays that visit and tries to get that background information. Well, with Yosef Chaim, we're learning that he's caught in the middle of a lot of things. Here he has like a chip on his shoulder. We see that chip. We see the chip in the way he interacts with his family, but we also see the chip when he interacts at his temple. He has a chip, and he has to kind of bow down to the rabbi, but he wants to be a leader. He wants to be significant in the community. He's not a rabbi himself, but he definitely wants to be a prominent figure. He wants to be someone that's known and as a man of respect. Here he is. He uses his money from his business to try to buy some of that respect. We also see that he is a family person and trying to get into and integrate himself more into Chabad, a lot more, but with the choice of his marriage. Even there was a surprise. How did you marry Chabad? And he's like, that's what I had to do, because his wife is clearly Orthodox. And we see this in a new side of Yosef, because before we saw him with his family, but now we're seeing him as an independent. That's someone who's broken off and he's on his own. He's doing things in his own way, and we get these subtle hints at who he is, his mannerisms, and it's very intense. Is he a bad person? Of course, he did a very bad thing. Clearly, there is no question about that. But that's the thing about this episode. Is Yosef Chaim a bad person, or is he just a misguided person? And I hate saying just as if that justifies it. It does not justify the action, but you have to understand that is something that's causing a lot of anger and resentment. People seeing a human side of Yosef Chaim, and they don't want to humanize what is deemed a monster, because clearly this act was an act of strangling someone and then hitting him on the head with the iron rod and then setting him on fire as he's still alive. A child at that is nothing short of a monster's deed. So actually, in some ways, it gives monsters a bad name. So here we still get this humanizing, form of who Yosef Chaim is. We also meet his rabbi, Rabbi Yitzhak ben Shoshan, who is this powerful rabbi. He is a rabbi. He's the people's rabbi. He's younger than Yosef's father. He seems to be he's in contrast to Yosef Chaim. Rabbi Yitzhak is who Yosef kind of wants to be, which is why I feel that Yosef is always putting the rabbi not down, but chipping away at little things that he does and says and is. So Yosef definitely brings up the fact that the rabbi's wife is a convert. His wife brings up Moses' wife was a convert, because converts, and this is something that you would understand once you're in the code, converts are not easily accepted. In Judaism is usually passed down from mother to child. So being just raised in Judaism isn't enough. Even converting, there's a lot that you go through to convert. And I'm not just talking circumcision, I'm talking about a lot of process. And so converts are still somehow a little bit outcasted. A lot of people don't accept converts. A lot, of course, being a small but loud minority. With Rabbi Yitzhak, he has a wife, Janina Kovalevsky, who we realize is a Russian convert. There was this time where Russians came to Israel, and a lot of Russians came because they fled. Of course, there was prosecution and persecution of Jews in Russia, but also some came just to get away from being in Russia. And now we find in Israel that there's an amount of churches that have opened to compensate for this Russian diaspora that has come to Israel. So in this case, the rabbi's wife is a convert. The rabbi himself, born in Netanya, which is known for a bit of Orthodoxism. And of course, he's a practicing member of Chabad. He's an Orthodox Hasidic Jew. In this case, let's notice the signs. A, the men don't touch women outside of their family members, and the women don't touch men outside of their family members either. So either they're family or married, but they don't touch men. Also, the women cover their hair. We see that the rabbi's wife and Yosef Chaim's wife both have immaculate hair. Those are actually wigs. They have wigs on, and the wig is covering their own birth hair. There's a lot of other things, how they pray, the separation of men and women inside the temple, and things of that nature are denotations of Chabad. We also get this concept of Ashkenazi and Sephardic. Now, I want to break that down and explain what Ashkenazis are. European Jews. So we're thinking of conceptually white Jews. They are the Jews that we see often, or much more often at least, portrayed in the media. Sephardi Jews are Jews from the Middle East. They are browner in skin. They look, for a lack of better description, they look Middle Eastern, or they look Arab, so to speak, or have a tint to their skin. And there is something that's kind of unspoken, the unspoken truth. There's a division in a lot of ways between Ashkenazis and Sephardis. And there's a bit of racial tension between the two. Now, that has become a lot better over the years, especially going in. It is 2019 after all, so hopefully it's getting much better. But there has always been a small bit of tension between the two. And a lot of people blame Ashkenazis for that. And of course, whenever one side becomes an aggressor, the other side also takes it and aggresses. So it's an unfortunate reality that's this slight division. Now, does this or anything we say apply to everyone? No, it does not. So I don't want to unfairly criticize or critique. I'm simply stating facts regarding certain cultural nuances that are meant to be understood. We also get this concept that the rabbi might be a bit right-wing. These connections to these orthodox and yet extreme rabbis, Rabbi Ginsburg, Rabbi Shalom Dov Walpo, these are extreme rabbis, and they are being taught. Now, the rabbi, Yitzhak, is not as extreme as they are, but is there a sense of extremism? Yes, there is. There's a slight one, and we see that. Simon goes undercover as an IDF soldier, Israeli Defense Forces, and he goes in, something that most Israelis actually go through for 2 years after they turn 18. And some people, of course, make it a career. There's a lot of reserves, as we saw. 40,000 reserves were actually called into action during Jerusalem at this time for what was going on. And it was a very big deal. And the fact that they even have 40,000 reserves at hand explains to you how the IDF basically functions as a normal part of the society. In a lot of places, especially in the Middle East, most people do tend to go into military service or serve in some capacity. Once they hit the age of 18, they typically serve about 2 years for their country. That's a very common thing. So Simon goes undercover. He's an IDF soldier. He ingratiates himself into the temple. He meets everybody with the purpose to get closer to Yosef Chaim, to get to know him, get to see him up close and personal. They went in, they implanted cameras all through the house. They're getting this information. They're getting the phone calls. Nothing concrete, but a lot of things where they're hinting at, or there's a presumption of guilt. Here we have Yuri examining, and they all want to basically. They want to get to the bottom of this. This is causing so much strife in the region. In Jerusalem itself, and we've brought this up in previous after shows, in Jerusalem itself, this is one of the cities where there's an East and West Jerusalem that the Palestinians and the Israelis live, and usually peacefully, yet there is some discord. And when a tension erupts, it usually erupts in Jerusalem because of the close proximity. The people are actually they basically see each other, and they're in a small tight corridor, working businesses and side by side in a lot of ways, and then go their separate ways when they go home, and that causes some division. So Simon plays on a little bit of this and goes in. We also learn Simon has a Chabad background, which we assumed in episode 4, but this one was definitely confirmed as he explains. I know these people, I know what they go through. And he's walking on eggshells with them. The rabbi intercepts Simon's attempt to go to Shabbat with Yosef Chaim. That's something that would normally happen in a temple, is that someone would see there's a person at the temple who's new or doesn't have somewhere to go for Shabbat and would invite them to Shabbat. Shabbat, sundown from Friday, sundown to Saturday. That's Shabbat. That's the holy day. Every religion has a holy day. For Christianity, it's typically Sunday. However, Shabbat is a little more strict in the concepts. No electricity because of a rule saying that you can't use any fire. So what we have is people walk to temple on Shabbat. There's a whole ritual that goes on before with showering and cleansing and water before praying. I mean, it's ritualistic in that way. And Shabbat dinner is when the family gets together and everyone eats. They bring out the challah, they pray, and Shabbat dinner is actually a vital, important part of Shabbat dinner, of Shabbat. So they go to the Shabbat dinner at the rabbi's house, and we meet certain people. Zev, this mathematician who's shady as F, man. Zev is just shady. He's just on, and he seems to have this dubious past. He's kind of on to Simon because he's like, I don't trust him. This isn't Simon's like, I'm an IDF soldier who repairs air conditions, and Zev is like, I don't trust this guy. This isn't that. And the rabbi in good faith is like, no, he's a good, stop doing that. Stop speaking Russian. Please speak nicely to him. He's our guest, and things like this. So we get into the mind of the rabbi, and this is the community, of course, that Yosef is raised in. This community that's more extreme, that's orthodox, and is not a friend to the concept of Palestine in most ways. Okay, so this kind of sets up where all the ingredients to create a Yosef Chaim comes from. We also get this Torah portion of Pinhas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, who picks up a spear, catches Zimri, a kosher Jew, with the Midianite woman, and stabs them in the genitals. In Shemach Yehudite, which is like for the Jews, stabs them in the genitals, and this is something the rabbi brings up, and this is Yosef Chaim. It's like, this is why we do this, and it kind of gives them. Well, there's a Torah background to this. Now, I want everyone to remember that is not it. Like any religion, 99% is about peace, love, understanding, tolerance, and loving thy neighbor and all these things. And then there will be a 1% line that's about something violent, and people tend to gravitate towards that. It's like extreme people will use anything to justify their actions, even love. And that's where this comes from, using that. Now, we get into episode 6, but before we go there, I'd love to thank all of you at home for helping us be the ESPN of TV talk. I know a lot of you listen to us on iTunes. If you are, subscribe, share, and give us that five-star rating we deserve. We appreciate it very much. And tell your friends to tell their friends. Keep being a part of the discussion. I love it. Comment below. We definitely get to your comments, and we love hearing from you. Thank you, each and every one of you. Now, episode 6. Episode 6. Coming off episode 5, what happens at the end? Man, all that information that was being built up and that inner struggle with Simone going in undercover, we get the bust. They go, hey, let's go in. They push the button, and we get secret forces, and Shabbat goes in and arrests Yosef Chaim and the nephews, including Avishai, who has taken a vow of silence, which is a very important thing. He tried to go back to the yeshiva. He's trying to run away. He's taken a vow of silence. We see him walking and Simone trying to offer him a ride, but he's like, no. And he sleeps outside of the house. You can tell Avishai is very conflicted. There's a lot of conflict going in and going on inside him. So that's why episode 6 is like, boom, we switch gears and we're going fast forward. We have them, we lock them up, we're interrogating them. The Shabbat is doing their job. They're allowed to typically hold people for up to 6 days, I believe, without any lawyers involved. In this case, something is said that's actually a very subtle nod where they say, but they're Jewish. They have rights, because we see when it comes to the Palestinians, their rights aren't as defined as those of Jewish citizens of Israel. And that is a real thing. Not my opinion. It is the truth. If you don't like it, let's fix the law. So we get this interrogation. They are not legally entitled to representation. That's why we have that court case in which the defense fund comes in and says, hey, who, by the way, they typically defend national terrorists. National terrorism is usually not this gruesome in Israel, but of course it can be. It is still atrocious when you're burning down mosques or spray painting or anything, because hate is a big crime in Israel. They are a zero tolerance hate nation in a lot of ways. So in this interrogation, we get Avishai sitting there, not speaking. We get Yosef Chaim talking, but talking in circles. He's talking nonsense, blaming it on his pills, saying he went to the beach, he went to the park, he put his kid to bed. He's giving them different stories each time. And we see the other nephew, of course, saying, hey, I got to take this test. I'm Sephardi. They don't help. Ashkenaz schools don't help Sephardi. They only have one position for me at this yeshiva. I need to take this test. I have nothing to do with it. Those two are a lot more confident, but we see this turmoil in Avishai, who's taken this vow of silence, but he's not speaking. No. He has nothing to say. He's not speaking. He's not speaking up. And that's when they call in the good doctor. They call in Dr. Defra Segal. Dr. Defra has been in this position. She does not want to help. She doesn't want to help because she doesn't want to get involved strictly. She doesn't want to, of course, break her personal vows to her clients. Of course, we have this doctor-patient privilege. And also, I feel like she sympathizes a lot more, especially with Avishai. She even says to Shimon, she's like, straight out, she's like, Avishai wouldn't do this on her own. If anything, and she says it, she says, I'm just guessing, as if no one has said anything to her. If anything, Yosef would have been the ringleader. And Shimon is in agreement. He does not believe Avishai would be capable of such a thing either because of his demeanor. He's clearly going through it all. He's carrying this weight on his shoulder. The good doctor comes in. She's able to use her therapeutic methods in order to break through and break Avishai's vow of silence. And she does it in her own way. They turn off the cameras. They turn off the recording devices. And at this point, the judge has only given them 12 hours further with no lawyer interference. Because we all know once the lawyer becomes involved, everyone knows if you've watched Dateline or First 48, once the lawyer becomes involved, your client's not going to say a thing, right? So here we have a certain amount of time. That pressure went from 6 days now down to we have 12 hours left, and we got to get Avishai speaking. We got to get him talking. And the doctor goes in, but she's conflicted. Her husband goes with her. She gets that call. She goes in. Her husband goes in with her, and she discusses it with her husband. She's like, basically, she doesn't want to do that. But the husband speaks the truth. The husband and Shimon speak the truth to her. Hey, we're close to a civil war. A lot of things are going on. We need this to be done. You need to go in there, and you're not breaking any rules. You're just getting him to talk. We don't need you to get him a confession. We need to break through to him so he's willing to talk, because we don't think he had something to do with it. Or if he did, we need to know everybody's role. The good doctor breaks through. And that is the start of cooperation from Avishai, who we know from the story is the one who is the cooperating witness and tells all, which we could tell from the beginning. He's the one that it's impacted the most. Yuri is at a difficult position. This is one of those make it or break it. This is one of those you are in the hot seat. Man, if this goes backwards or it goes awry, this ruins so much. There is a civil war brewing, and you don't want to be the cause. You have to do your job right. And Yuri seems to be a person who actually believes in justice, even though, of course, he believes in his people. We see two types of Shabbat. Some who are more worried about how this is going to look for Jews than actually solving this case, and then some who just want to solve the case. In the case of that young detective who goes in like a hammer, right? Yuri is kind of in the middle. He's doing both. He wants to do what's best for everybody involved. And that's why he's the one who goes and talks to Muhammad's father and says, hey, this is what it is. We have suspects in play. Of course, Muhammad's father is not very trusting of the Israeli side. That's a mistrust that's in the culture as of right now, has happened, especially with the quote unquote conflict as it goes on. There is a mistrust between Palestinians and Israelis, the same way that in some black communities there's a mistrust between the black community and police officers. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So Yuri goes in and he's the one to explain to the father, we have suspects, we're on your side, because he needs those parents to cooperate. There is a chance that the Palestinian family would not cooperate with the Israeli system, that they're going to take matters into their own hand. And that's what happens, that eye for an eye. We keep going back and forth. Now, something that happened that was very important in the episode that may have been that kind of glanced over is the concept of how everyone's kind of using Muhammad for their own agenda. Everybody's trying to use Muhammad. Everyone wants to use Muhammad. We get the Shabak leaking the information about the Dawn who was killed, and they're like, oh, an Arab killed him, killed this woman in order to like cut off some of the bad PR that they're getting for having Orthodox Jews in interrogation for the crime of Muhammad Khdeir. We get the Palestinian side trying to use Muhammad to kind of rally some type of violent response. We get the mosque trying to do it in order to influence more people. And then of course we have just Muhammad's dad, who's just like, yo, his son died. And he knows the importance of what he plays, and he's angry and he's upset. And he doesn't know what to do, but he understands everyone's agenda, and he doesn't want to play his hand wrong, but he just it's just a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure, just unimaginable pressure. And we see how they're trying to pressure. And of course, his son, Iyad, is like, this is kind of what he wants too, because he's buying into all the hype. And the father makes the decision to change the name from Martyr of Al-Aqsa, the mosque, to Martyr, the Dawn Martyr, the name that was given to him originally for Muhammad Khdeir. So that's important, and that wraps up episode 6 as we're going into this cooperating Avishai. We get that news report that's part reality and then part, of course, interjected reality with Muhammad's father being and talking to Mazen, the Palestinian Authority president. So a lot of things are going on, and we can't wait for episodes 7 and 8, man, because now we're kind of going into that judicial process, and we're going to get the full story, it looks like, because Avishai is ready to talk. He's ready to talk, and he has a lot to say and a lot to get off his chest. We still think of Avishai as a good kid, and we still think of this as a horrible, horrendous act. Let's get into some news and gossip, shall we?
AfterBuzz TV News.
So, New York Times had to print Netanyahu has called to boycott HBO's Our Boys. And here we have one of the best opinion pieces, which is Netanyahu's call to boycott HBO's Our Boys is an attempt to silence self-reflection. By attacking Israeli artists who are critical of Israeli policies, the prime minister and other officials are causing lasting harm to the country. And this is by Nathan Hirsch. This is a conversation that has to be had. And we get this picture of Hussein and Soha Abu Khdeir, who are the actual parents. And they talk about how Netanyahu's call to boycott, and this is what I was at the beginning of the episode, I discussed how both sides seem to be upset. This is that call to boycott, and we got to be aware of that. You guys want to check this out. You're going to want to read up on the Netanyahu's call to boycott and all the sides that are upset, and that's why I think that this show is doing a great job. When people are mad at you, you're doing something right. Let's get into that You Should Know segment. You Should Know, where we talk about something that happened in the show that we should know. Now, a name that was shot out during the show was Shalvat Pass. Shalvat Pass was a 10-month-old baby who was shot by a Palestinian sniper in 2001, and that was a big outroar as well. It's almost as if, man, this violence just begets violence, right? So the concept is, everyone's looking for there are a lot of people that are upset, and this was the previous to this 2014 last upheaval. This was the one before that, because a 10-month-old baby seemed to be targeted by a Palestinian sniper in 2001, and that was an atrocious thing. They bring that up in episode 5, I believe, so that name, Shalvat Pass, go check it out, read up on that story. But man, they keep saying little things like they kill Palestinians every day, and we see the rockets, 150 rockets being shot into Israel. And of course, there's a retaliation. It's this a circle. And honestly, if this show shows me anything, it's that peace is the truest and only answer, especially for two groups of people that are much more alike than they are different. So I want to thank all of you for watching this episode of the Our Boys after show. We did go over season 1, episodes 5 and 6, Shabbat Shalom, Accepted Silence. My name is Tehran. Find me at I Am Tehran all across the board. I am hosting and paneling on a slew of other AfterBuzz after shows. Thank you to Ryan in the booth for holding us down. The other shows that I talk about are a lot less heavy than this one, so check me out on those. I appreciate you. We will see you next week as we get into episode 7, and then, of course, episode 8 following. Until then, Shabbat Shalom.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.